All right. Hi, folks. Welcome to all of you. Tonight's class is the first session of the fall quarter of my year-long miracles course. And we have one of these live classes every week for enrolled students. And tonight we've opened it up for anyone who'd like to audit. You can tell it's a big noisy cacophony when we unmute everybody because there's lots of you, and I'm thinking a lot of you have still not joined in yet. And for those of you who are new to this program, the Miracles course is a comprehensive program of weekly spiritual exercises and personal coaching, all about living a miraculous life. And you know, I'm still hearing some background noise, so if there's anyone on the telephone who's doing this by phone who hasn't already muted yourself, what I'd like you to do is press *6. I think you did it. Perfect. And the course works with a circular curriculum that uses the seasons as a template for wholeness. So the content actually mirrors the themes of whatever seasons we're in. The spring and summer seasons of light call us to externalize and to birth things in the physical realm, while the fall and winter seasons of darkness call us to internalize and release our attachment to the material world. And the whole cycle of the seasons just makes a perfect template for the whole of human experience, from birth to death to rebirth. So the Miracles course, it has no beginning or end, and each quarter is a potential starting point. And wherever you begin, you'll be doing the same lessons as everyone in the program. In the summer quarter that we just completed, we addressed topics related to nature's season of abundant growth. And we worked with the metaphysical principles of manifestation, of prosperity. And later in the season, the lessons matched the slowing pace of summer, touching upon themes such as creating ease and allowing bliss. And now in the fall, the Miracles course curriculum begins with an exploration of physical health and spiritual healing. And in the next couple of weeks, we build toward a powerful healing experience that we do the week of the fall equinox. Every equinox and solstice point, we do some big spiritual ritual designed to manifest something. In the fall, it's all about manifesting healing. And also addressed in this season, as I was touching upon before we started, are topics related to how to flow with change, how to transcend fear, letting go of what we no longer need, topics related to death and beyond, all of which lays the foundation for the spiritual transformational work of the winter season. And there's a lot more in-depth information about the content of each month on the Miracles course website, but that just gives a little bit of a nutshell overview. And for now, I really want to move on toward the focus of this week's lesson. You know, seasonally, September is a month of great transition in a lot of parts of the world. As summer ends, the fall equinox, which occurs in the third week of the month, marks the point at which darkness exceeds light for another 6 months. And fall really encourages a shift in attention from outer directed activity to a more inward focus. And you know, I'm hearing a little bit of background noise. If any of you have just joined in who are on the phone, what I'd like you to do is to mute yourself by pressing *6. You telephone folks, I can't mute you myself, so you need to do that for us. Just press *6, that'll mute you. Now, in the growing cycle, fall is when the harvest is collected, the fruit is eaten or preserved, and the seeds get extracted, while all the abundant greenery of summer fades away. And we may want to cling to those last vestiges of summer, yet we know we can't keep the dark and cold at bay for long. Change and letting go are forced upon us, whether we're ready for it or not. And personally, I am never ready for fall. I'm kind of a summer lover. And many of us, this is the time of year when we catch colds as our bodies are struggling to adjust to a seasonal shift. And psychologically, even though the spring phase of experience, which is all about the rush of births and new beginnings, it really creates just as much change and stress in our lives as the fall phase that's about dying away. But we still tend to associate birth with joyous emotions, while death evokes feelings of fear and sadness and loss of control. Birth fills our thoughts with wonderful possibilities, but death really requires true vision and faith to see that just as every birth leads to death, every death leads eventually to a new birth. And the inner work of fall invites us to look at our relationship to change and our adaptability and our comfort with endings and our comfort with being out of control at that egoic level. And the spiritual potential inherent in the 6-month descent into darkness and the symbolic underworld it represents is that in meeting our darkest fears head on, we wind up emerging with this deep knowing that in truth there's nothing to fear. Now September, which merely hints at the darkness to come, is just the perfect time to prepare for the descent into winter by doing some shoring up of our physical well-being at this point where the adjustment from warm to cool starts to add stress to our bodies. Now, giving some attention to our physical health right now can really help us through that whole winter season of colds and flus and darkness-related depression. So this week, we're going to give attention to the underlying purpose of illness. Now, Bill, I'm wondering if you can help us with the background noise here. Well, that seemed to help. Thank you. We're going to give attention to the underlying purpose of illness and, the insight that really listening to our physical symptoms can give us, if we're willing to understand them and not just treat them. So I want to talk about the spiritual purpose of illness, because illness results when we've grown out of alignment with our highest good and our highest purpose. Whether it's on the small scale, of spending a few days in bed with the flu, or the large scale of years struggling with a debilitating illness. Getting sick just has a wonderful way of stopping us in our tracks and forcing us to have new priorities, even if it's just for a few days. And sometimes on a major level of just redirecting our lives from the big picture paradigm of our higher self. Illness invariably helps to satisfy unmet needs, and it gets us back on track in ways our conscious choices haven't been able to. And again, sometimes this is just as simple as a few days of enforced rest, when we're feeling overwhelmed and need a little assimilation time. Now, a more serious illness sometimes will push us to change a whole lifetime's worth of old habits. And consequently, even though we may address any number of symptoms, the root of an illness isn't going to go away until we willingly choose the new priorities that ill health forces upon us. And maybe some of you have had this experience. When we ignore our minor symptoms, we tend to invite louder ones. true healing requires coming into alignment with our highest good. And if we address symptoms without also supporting this realignment, it may be difficult to sustain a state of health and well-being for long. We'll need to manifest some new event to help us continue the deeper process of change that, on some level, we're ready for spiritually. Now, there's a lot of proponents of mind-body healing who hold that we're responsible for our health or illness at the physical level only to a point. Then heredity and circumstances and environmental factors kick in. However, I think that when we take, a longer spiritual view, and also let go of the whole notion that illness is bad, or that we must have done something wrong to bring it upon us, then all illness can be seen as purposeful, both to the personality and to the soul. Now the ego, that is the part of us that believes we're defined by the limits of our physical body and thus highly vulnerable. The ego can't help but find illness threatening and regard it as the enemy. The ego, which tries to control its way to safety, turns the whole idea of self-responsibility into an exercise in fearful personal control, with illness being a sign of failure. However, as we addressed more deeply in another lesson, it was in another season, in fact we touch upon this theme from time to time here throughout the year, responsibility is not the same as control. We can only control what's in the range of our conscious awareness. And illness is often a way that we bring hidden, non-integrated aspects of self to the surface and open ourselves to new options. This, I think, is maybe one of its most important functions. So instead of seeing illness as our failure to be responsible for our health, it's a lot more useful to view it as a sign that we're ready to grow. Now, the part of us that chooses illness as a path toward growth is the self with a capital S, the spiritual self, that sees our highest good in a way that the limited perceptions of our ego can't. And from the perspective of spiritual reality, illness is always a step toward wholeness. Of course, no one consciously chooses pain or illness. Yet the experience of dealing with these challenges can lead us on a journey that ultimately delivers great rewards. I've heard many people with cancer and other life-threatening diseases describe their illness as one of the greatest blessings of their lives because it forced them to completely reshuffle priorities and pursue new paths that brought profound fulfillment. And the illness gave them permission to make choices they wouldn't have considered otherwise. Now, I don't think that we need pain in order to grow. In fact, I think the growth comes when we realize we don't need this pain and we make some inner shift that allows the pain to be released. I don't think, I need to stress that again, I don't think that we need pain in order to grow. I think that the growth happens as we realize how easy it is to release the pain. That's the growth. Now, while illness may signal our spiritual readiness for change, our personality may not feel the least bit ready or willing. And typically, the more we resist exploring new priorities, lifestyles, and self-awareness, the more illness just keeps pushing us, often against our personal will, to submit to a life that's circumscribed by painful symptoms. And we may wind up feeling very victimized by these changes. Or alternately, we might feel empowered by them, depending upon whether we let the experience of illness lead us somewhere, as with recognizing how we do have choices to shift. And we always have the choice to shift out of pain. So we have that opportunity to be led to something just powerfully new, or sometimes, we resist, we're kicking and screaming a little more until it pushes us, again, kicking and screaming, into our next step. The more we surrender willingly to the changes illness brings, not the pain, but the changes, the new priorities, the different way of life, the less we experience pain and struggle. And this includes even when the final result of an illness is death. Ultimately, death too is a realignment with our highest good. When life becomes a state we've outgrown, death becomes the next stage of growth. Death becomes the next phase of life. And even at times when we don't consider ourselves ill, think, I don't have any illnesses, we may still have a symptom or two, some chronic allergy condition, or a tendency toward headaches, or a pain or a weakness in a particular body part, or a susceptibility to certain kinds of illnesses. Whether we're dealing with the experience of serious illness or simply the occasional pesky symptom, listening to these physical manifestations of dis-ease really can uncover all kinds of levels of meaning and purpose to them that we may never have realized were there. Our physical symptoms communicate to us in a language that's just filled with obvious metaphors. If we're willing to pay attention, they tell us a lot about our needs, our imbalances, and our path of healing and growth. In fact, the very metaphors we use in speaking often mirror the physical symptoms our body manifests. I first became aware of this when I was director of a Center for Attitudinal Healing in Baltimore, Maryland, that worked with people dealing with physical illnesses, and that was my area of specialization at that time. And I noticed how people's pet expressions had a way of literally describing their illness. There was a woman with cancerous tumors in her leg who frequently used the expression, "I can't stand it," and she would often punctuate it with a little stomp. And then there was someone with food allergies who continually said, "I just can't stomach it." And then there was a woman with skin cancer who would frequently speak of things getting under her skin. And in fact, she didn't even like being touched. She was very sensitive to anyone touching her. And once when I was sharing these examples in a workshop, a woman spoke up and said, I have difficulty receiving from people, and I just realized that my favorite expression is, "I just can't take it." So to start understanding the language of your own physical symptoms, consider the metaphorical meanings of those affected body parts and functions. First, where in your body do you have symptoms? Do you tend to get allergies, got stuff going on up here? Do you get a lot of colds? Do you get headaches? Do you get sore throats? Do you have like heart issues or stomach issues or shoulders, or do you have problems with your hands or other internal organs, or your other limbs? Just ask yourself, what are these body parts or these systems, what are their functions? And what are some of the metaphors we hold around these functions? Like, for example, if you have pain in your hands, ask yourself, are you holding on too tightly in some way? Are you having trouble letting go? Are you trying to handle everything yourselves? I've seen a number of people who are just really bad at delegating responsibility, often have stuff come up in their hands, all kinds of pains. Do you have difficulty reaching out for love and support? Are you having difficulty grasping something? That's what I mean by looking at some of the metaphors and see if there's some literal, kind of metaphorical truth going on. If your neck and shoulders hurt, ask yourselves, are you shouldering more than your share of responsibility? Are you being stiff-necked or overly rigid in how you're seeing things? Because with our neck hurts, we can't really bend, or we can't look at things more than one way. If you're a woman with issues related to your breasts, ask yourself, have you been suckling the world until there's nothing left for you? Are you a big giver and getting kind of at the end of your, bottom of your own barrel? Do you feel in need of nurturing yourself? For women, breasts are also often related to how we feel about ourselves as women. So, you can ask yourself, do you feel in any way inadequate about yourself just as a woman, as an attractive woman? If you're someone with heart problems, have you felt heartbroken? Have you closed your heart to warmth and love? Have you lost your joy and your passion for life? Just really go through all the metaphors you can think of and see which ones best fit the way you feel. There was once a woman in one of my workshops who could not see how there could possibly be any link between the back injury she sustained in a car accident, and it wasn't at all her fault, any connection between that and her emotional needs. Until I asked her, how easy or difficult was it for her to feel supported in life? And how easy or difficult was it to allow other people to support her? Because think about it, our spine is what supports us. And she admitted that, support had always been extremely difficult for her. She felt like it wasn't there for her, she couldn't ask for it, she didn't feel supported, and so on. And as a result of the injury, her life had changed to include a regular routine of all kinds of therapies with caring professionals whose sole agenda it was to support her. And she was actually getting a lot of nurturance, not just physical therapy, but human warmth and nurturance from that in a way that some deep part of her really needed and had not found a way to get in any other way. And now this isn't a dysfunctional thing. This is us doing the best we know how, because a lot of this is the manifestation of things we learned so early on. It just became part of our programming, and it's a very unconscious thing. If we're not good at receiving support, it's not that we choose not to be supported, it's that we just don't know how. And sometimes this experience of an illness is what helps us learn how. It's what helps teach us that. Now, addressing the situation indicated by the metaphor can powerfully assist healing, and sometimes even alleviate the need for other treatment. Just to give you an example, there was a time when I just felt really burdened by the pressures of life. I was shouldering more than I could carry, so to speak. I developed this very painful frozen shoulder condition. And I had 2 different medical professionals say that I was going to need several months of really painful physical therapy. And I just thought about that and I thought, I don't really want to do that. Just what I needed on top of an already full plate, a lot of really painful therapy. So I decided I was going to give it a few months to treat it my way. And what I did is I just cleared many projects from my plate. And I gave myself this very uncharacteristic several-month break. I played more, I worked less, I made relaxing a priority. And it was amazing. Almost as soon as I decided to do this, my shoulder started getting more mobility. And it actually improved so quickly that I wound up not needing any physical therapy. Within 3 months, it was completely better. Now again, I'm still hearing background noise. If anybody has joined us in the course of this and you're on the phone, what I'd like you to do is mute yourself by pressing *6. Now, there you go. Heard that. And you know, there are some amazingly literal connections that can be made between symptoms and illnesses. But it's also important to recognize that there is no simple mind-body cookbook explanation that you can just apply to every illness. There can be really profound spiritual purposes to a condition that aren't readily visible. You know, one great example was my dear friend named Cheryl, who was born with a crippling degenerative disease that did take her life when she was in her 30s. She would on occasion be accosted by over-eager healers who just told her that if she only had enough faith, she could be healed. Very, you know, just very enthusiastic. And she took great offense at this, primarily because these individuals assumed that just because she lived life in a wheelchair and in an obviously different body, that she wasn't healed. You know, Cheryl strongly believed in a spiritual purpose to her physical disability, and she believed in reincarnation, and she felt certain that she had committed suicide in a previous life and had chosen her current situation to help her learn to love life no matter what. And she felt that her life lesson was not to change her physical body, but to appreciate life and live in joy in spite of any pain and limitation her body created. And by the end of her life, she unquestionably did, more than anybody I've ever met. Now, many of you are probably familiar with Louise Hay's classic book called You Can Heal Your Life. Just a great classic text in all kinds of ways. If you don't have that in your library, I recommend it. But this book has a listing of physical symptoms and their corresponding emotional dynamics at the back. And while I highly recommend this as a useful reference to have on hand, I really don't suggest that you start by reading someone else's interpretation of your symptoms, because symptoms and their messages are very complex and personal. And sometimes reading what the expert has to say will close our mind to our own insights. And you know, even if a correspondence is right on the money for us, if we don't feel the truth of it for ourselves, the information isn't going to change anything. So in coming to an understanding of why we have a particular symptom, instead of rushing quickly to a neat and tidy theory about what it means, I think it may be enough at first to simply trust that there is a meaning, maybe many layers of meaning. Now we're going to do an exercise now that can help you get some insight into the language of your physical symptoms. And at the end, I'll open it up and take some questions. And if there's time, we'll give you some help if we have time to help one or two of you figure out what the connection is. But like I'm saying, do keep in mind that an illness often speaks to us on many levels at once. So be mindful not to latch on to one single explanation to the exclusion of all others. Be open to what you get doing this exercise and doing this work, and keep opening. Keep letting the messages of your body take you into deeper and deeper understanding. Now, I always suggest having paper and pen handy for these classes, so this is where you might want to get it out and just jot down some notes as I go through the following questions. And if one of them rings true for you, just make a note of this. First off, before we go into this reflection, just identify where in your physical body do you tend to manifest symptoms. It may be that you have some kind of significant illness that you're dealing with. It may be that you don't, that, you know, maybe you just get a little touch of allergies in the spring or fall, or, you know, you have a sensitive stomach, or have a little chronic back pain, just something that's just a pesky symptom. But see if there is something that feels important enough to give it some attention here tonight. I would go with whatever is screaming the loudest. Don't go with your pesky symptom if you have a big screaming illness that's getting all of your attention. Go with that one. And just see what that is. And when you've got something in mind, then just take a look at all the physical functions of this part of the body and the metaphors that come to mind related to these functions. If it's some of your innards, your internal workings, just ask, what does that organ do for your body? Does it break down food? Does it release what you don't need anymore? Does it, what does it do? What does it do? And then look at some of your pet expressions. Just see if they have any physical body references. Because these expressions too can tell you something about real symptoms that you might manifest. For example, I've had a tendency to manifest headaches ever since I was a kid. And an expression I used to say frequently was, I feel like my head's going to explode. And I didn't say this when I actually had a headache, when I literally did feel like my head was going to explode. Instead, this was my spontaneous expression of exasperation. When I just had too many things going on in my life, too many thoughts in my mind, I felt overwhelmed, and I can go there. And I have taken this expression out of my speech. And I don't have very many headaches anymore. Now, one of the things I suggest that everybody take out of your speech is a phrase along the lines of, "This is killing me." Just stop saying that. Just stop saying that. Because you don't want that to become your truth, especially when what you really mean is, "This is really bothering me right now." Change your words. Don't put your body in it. Don't say, this is a real pain in the neck or pain in the butt. Don't use those kinds of expressions, because you don't need to pull in that energy to your body. So just notice those, take them out. If you are noticing that you have any of those kinds of expressions, see if it does fit some of your actual physical body symptoms. And as you allow, some of these metaphors and expressions come to mind, just play with them a little, free associate with them until they start to reveal some insight into the emotional dynamics underlying your symptoms. There are very literal connections. People who have suffered emotional heartbreak often wind up having physical heart issues. There's often a lot of a real body connection there, emotion to body. So it's important to just recognize that so that you can, in a very proactive way, take steps toward your own healing. Now, the next thing you want to do is ask yourself, how might this physical condition be serving you? Something we've touched upon here in a number of different lessons is that any life condition that we're struggling with but can't seem to change has some unconscious payoff keeping it in place. And physical illness is no exception. For example, using myself, I discovered over the years that headaches actually do have a number of payoffs for me. Among other things, they slow my mind down when it feels like my head is going to explode. When my head's full of pain, it can't be full of thoughts. I have to just drop the thinking. Now, another thing I noticed about my headaches, this is when I used to get migraines, is that when I started feeling too happy, I would often, a day or so later, get a migraine, and it would just bring me right down. And I was wondering, what the heck is this about? And as I gave some attention to it, I was walking around one of the beautiful lakes in Minneapolis, wondering, what is this about? It occurred to me that in my childhood, growing up in an alcoholic family, if I was too happy and light and buoyant, I wouldn't see the next disaster coming. And so there was something ingrained in me that said, if I get too happy, I'm not safe. And having a little bit more of an edge of pain would bring me down to earth, put me more in my strength place, so I wouldn't be taken by surprise. So what I did is, when I got that insight, as I continued walking around the lake, and I've actually even heard some information, I'm not going to go deeply into this, that there might even be something about just walking, the bilateral, what it does with your brain, the bilateral back and forth of the brain, that helps anchor things in. So I have a feeling this is why it was so effective, walking. I started imagining the feeling of safety, which is very grounded and connected to the earth, along with that buoyant, light feeling of happiness. I let them both be in my body at the same time. When I really got it, I was about done with my walk. I stopped having migraines after that. I was getting them twice a month, stopped having them after that. So that's a little example of how we can work with these things in a healing way that can really release the need for the symptom. So ask yourself what your physical symptom may be helping you or allowing you or forcing you to do, to be, to have, that you wouldn't otherwise experience. Specifically, and here's where you might want to jot some things down, is it perhaps forcing you to let other people help you? Or is it causing you to spend your time differently? And if so, what might be the gain in this? Are you receiving attention, either positive or negative attention, that you wouldn't otherwise get? And if so, how is that attention giving you something that you need? Or maybe even giving you something that you expect. Sometimes negative attention, we subconsciously program to call that in because it preserves the familiar identity that we're not quite ready to let go of. Perhaps it keeps people from expecting too much from us, for example, just to name a possible gain. You can also ask yourself, was illness the way you received love and attention when you were young? Is your illness resulting in your developing new strengths and resources? Might it be preserving a familiar identity? And if so, what is that identity? And what might you lose that you don't want to lose if you acted outside your own box? Might it be this condition allowing you to put off doing something that feels burdensome or frightening? Or is it protecting you from failing at something by preventing you from beginning? Might it distract you and keep your attention away from things that just feel too painful to look at? Does physical pain take the place of emotional pain? Does this condition allow you to avoid painful or frightening emotions, such as anger or sadness or guilt or shame? Is illness a way that you implode instead of explode? I saw an interesting study once showing that people in prisons had a lower incidence of cancer than the general public. Think about that. People in prison are often folks who have a poor impulse control. They're more likely to be people who explode. And people who have cancer are a little bit more likely to implode. You know, and I could go on and on about that, but you know, does illness give you a way to do that? Does it give you permission to say no, to set boundaries, to get angry, to be selfish, or to grieve? Is it a way you can say, I can't, when that's easier than saying, I don't want to? Maybe you're the one who takes care of everybody. Maybe being ill gives you a chance to put yourself first for a change. And also ask yourself, how are your relationships with others affected by your symptoms? Have they deepened as a result? Has it been a way that you've gotten closer to people and really discovered who's there for you and who loves you? Or, on the other hand, does it provide an acceptable way to create space interpersonally, fewer relationships and more privacy, or more time alone? Does this condition offer protection from intimacy and maybe some of the possible hurts that could result from getting close? So these questions are good things to work with a bit more over time. You know, this is really deep work, and those of you who are doing this Miracles course in a small group, I know that there's a bunch of you in the St. Paul area who are all meeting to do this work. You have a real advantage in giving each other some insight and feedback. It's really a great exercise to do with other people, because, you know, some of this work, I think of it like having a hand stuck to the end of your nose. You know, try doing this for a minute. You know, nobody will see you. It's kind of like you can tell that there's something big stuck on your nose. It's really interfering with your perception. But, you know, I can't really tell it's a hand, but everybody else can. All of you can. and so that's why I really encourage doing this kind of work with like-minded others, because it can be so helpful to share your insight, your feedback, your intuition for one another. You can get to stuff that sometimes you just can't get to alone. Now, the recording of this class is going to be available on my website after tonight if you want to hear the questions again. And for those of you who are enrolled in the Miracles course, you can find all the written materials of this lesson online. And for our enrolled students, as you work with this material, if you need help with any of it, really do reach out to the faculty. You can always send me an email to get some input. I am just happy to do that. You can also bring questions to next week's class, because sometimes what you're thinking is also going to be helpful for somebody else to hear. And you can also use the online forum that you'll find at the end of every written lesson as a place to ask questions. And Reverend Sandy will be available to give input in that arena. So do reach out for help with this material as you need to. Now, when you can begin to discern what you, and by the way, I think I'm hearing background noise again. So if there's anybody else who has joined us a little bit late and you're on the phone, what you can do is mute yourself by pressing *6. Those of you on the phone, we can't mute you. We can mute people who are on the computer, but not people on the phone. So we need you to do that for us. So just press *6. And I heard that, thank you. Now, when you can begin to discern what you might be gaining from this physical condition, then ask yourself, what would you need to do to receive the gains without needing the physical condition in place to push you toward it? Now, the true answer to this question invariably involves some degree of stretching beyond your comfort zone. It's going to feel like a risk. It's going to feel like going against all your conditioning. So it's important to keep exploring this question until you get to where that stretch is for you, because that's where the real healing lies. You know, it might mean taking a day off before you get sick, when you just get to that I just feel overwhelmed with life place, and the responsible adult in you is saying, I can't take time off, I have too much to do. And so, you know, you wait until you get sick and you can't get off the couch. In my example of my sore shoulder, what I did is I gave myself 3 months off. Of course, I waited for the shoulder, but I did give myself that. Instead of putting myself into therapy where I was going to have to get that hands-on nurturing from a professional I was paying, I gave it to myself in a way that was a lot more fun. It might mean finding ways to ask for the love, the attention, and the support you crave without having to need it first. I was working once with, I was doing private sessions along with a healer. And the healer, he was great at just disappearing people's back pain. He'd just go poof, it's gone. And what I would do with the person is I would just talk with them a little bit and give them an assignment that would help them stay pain-free. And I remember working with a guy who's just a really responsible single dad of 2 young kids. And he told this whole story of being a former drug addict. He'd gotten himself sober, he cleaned up his act, he was working really hard to take care of his kids, mother was gone out of the picture. And his whole life was just working, taking care of these kids. Except for 3 times a week, he had to go for various therapies for his back. And, you know, that was the only time he got taken care of. That was his only me time. And so I gave him the assignment that he had to spend at least as much time doing things that were nice for himself as he was giving to taking care of his back pain. So his assignment was to go get a massage, whether he needed it or not. It was also to start going out on some dates, because he hadn't even been out on a date, and to really start building into his life some warmth and human touch and just hugs from loving people. So we need to look at how to build into our lives what the illness is forcing us to do. And if we look deeply enough into the payoffs of our illnesses, we're likely to uncover a lot of ways that our lifestyle has gotten significantly off track. And you know, it may seem like we're doing what we have to do, and yet when we wind up getting sick, we have to stop doing a lot of those things that we thought we had to do. Now, while doing it before we get sick may push us toward some difficult choices, the end results are really rich. I mean, they're richer than simply being symptom-free. Now, you know, one thing I don't mean to do here is encourage anyone to forego sensible medical supervision or to suffer unnecessarily, because I certainly downed my share of Excedrin when I was in the throes of a migraine. When I used to get them twice a month, I mean, Excedrin, love them. They were my saviors. But I am suggesting that we not rely solely on medicine to affect healing. Medicine is great for helping with symptoms. But listening to our symptoms and letting them guide us somewhere, instead of only seeking the most passive release from discomfort, may not be the easiest path short term, but it really does hold the richest rewards in the long term. It leads to a more fulfilling life. So, you know, part of the assignment in working with this exercise is to create for yourself a plan of things that you're willing to do to give yourself the gains you've identified without having to have illness forcing you to it. So I suggest see if you can find at least several things you're willing to do without having to have symptoms as a motivator. Now, if you are currently living with a life-threatening illness, I really suggest replacing the question of, how can I get well, with the questions, why do I want to get well? What do I have to live for? What do I want to get well for? Do I feel complete with my life as it stands? And if not, what is there left for me to do? True healing occurs when we embrace our passion and purpose for living, and not just embrace our battle with illness and struggle with our fear of death. Living as though each day is our last, and completing whatever is unfinished, and making the most of each moment is something that powerfully facilitates healing. And when we do pursue healing in this way, the outcome of the disease is really not the point anymore. We might find that our physical healing process speeds up miraculously, or that our symptoms remain the same, but they no longer inhibit our joy in living. And we may find that even though our disease progresses, we experience a profound sense of peace around the transition of death. Ultimately, we call forth whatever outcome best serves our highest good, and we feel at peace with it. Just to give you two examples, I know one man, he's now passed away, this was decades ago, but he was at death's door. He was an older gentleman, and he'd had a series of strokes and heart attacks, and I remember seeing him with a walker, and he looked really kind of green, and he could barely get around, and he wound up being hospitalized again. I think it was either a stroke or a heart event. And people were basically saying goodbye to him. I mean, even he thought, this is it, I'm not going to be released from the hospital this time. But when he was hospitalized, as he told the story, he said God spoke to him and told him he had work to do, and that he was to start a nonprofit organization to employ people that society had given up on. And danged if he didn't recover, get well, go out and start this nonprofit that was viable for years. It might still be going. I know he has passed away in recent years. But he got hundreds and hundreds of people employed, and had many more hale and hearty years after that experience. Completely fine, no need for walkers, great coloring, total mobility. That's one example. Now, another example was my close friend who I already mentioned, my friend Cheryl. She was a fabulous model for pursuing her passions and living life to the fullest right up to her very, very last minute of life. Just, weeks before her death, when she was completely bedridden, she was heavily medicated, Cheryl was busy planning a trip to Disney World. And her friends were kind of whispering, saying, should anybody tell her, she can't get to Disney World? I mean, But she was having the time of her life planning her trip to Disney World, and she never did make the trip, but she did have many better than Disney experiences that she told us about, her whole circle of friends that she had at that time, where she'd be leaving her body and talking with her angels, and then coming back, and then going back out again, talking with her angels. And her very last day of life included, well, first a 2-hour phone conversation with me where she called me literally in the middle of the night. And she called because she was so excited. She was describing a feeling she had had, that she was on the edge of being born. She was having a feeling of feeling suffocated, that she couldn't breathe. And this time when she had that, she felt like she was about to push her way through a birth canal, and she saw her favorite Uncle Bud, I think it was, who had just passed away 6 months earlier. She said he was waiting to catch her when she popped out, and she was so excited. She felt like she was almost there. And now the next afternoon, just hours before her death, and we didn't know she was that imminent. I mean, maybe we did, we didn't. A number of her friends were with her in the hospital. And they were all being really rowdy and, just having a body rowdy time, and they sneaked her down the hallway into a shower. She was forbidden to take showers, and they gave her a shower, which she just loved. And afterward, they shared an equally forbidden Last Supper of a big box of her very favorite chocolate donuts. And shortly after everyone left, Cheryl just easily slipped out of her body. And we all wanted to be there, but we suspected that she waited until she was all alone, because she knew we'd be upset watching her go, and that we'd forget the truth of how delighted and excited she was to take that next step. So I want to open it up to take questions and maybe see if anybody wants some help with understanding one of your symptoms. But first, I just want to mention a little bit for those of you who are enrolled students. These live classes more or less follow the weekly written lessons that you'll find online. Sometimes, though, the written lessons contain a lot more information than we can cover in an hour, so it's important to go to those written materials and review them, as well as just attend these classes. And also, many of the online lessons include recorded meditations that you can listen to, and they have a better sound quality than you're going to get in these recordings of classes. Now, other times, what we will do here covers different material than the written lessons. And I sometimes use this class time as a way to add a new level, a new dimension to the written course, so that we can cover more up-to-date, more here and now relevant material. And that's what we'll be doing next week. The written lesson of next week covers a lot of information about energetic and spiritual healing. And I'd like you to do that work in preparation for the healing we're going to do the following week. So do read those materials that we're not going to cover in class. But what I want to address next week is why so very many of us are feeling really, really, really stressed right now. We're going to do some healing work that's very specific to the times we're in. Because, if you've looked around the planet lately, you might have noticed that things are a little more crazy than usual in the world these days. And many of us are personally going through very challenging times, and times of rapid change. And in fact, the whole planet is in a phase of very rapid change. And this isn't just about the woo-woo energies out there. We can see this on really every level, in good ways and in very frightening ways. And I'm going to talk about some of what's happening and why, and some of the spiritual dimensions of it, where we're going with this in a collective way. And we're going to do a fairly intensive healing process around this, like, healing for our times process. So stay tuned, because that's going to be a very, I think, a very powerful session. Now, for those of you who are new to the course, another important layer to the work we do here is the prayer work that Reverend Deb Taramani does with all of you. She does that in monthly classes and also in one-to-one sessions. She goes by Rev Deb, and she's the person who I personally go to for spiritual counsel. And I just know you're all going to really enjoy working with her. She's a lot of fun, and she has really a long-standing reputation as a miracle worker. Really, truly. She's a licensed minister of religious science, and she's the pastor of the Center for Spiritual Living in Baltimore, and particularly known these days for her powerful work with spiritual mind treatment, which is a very specific form of prayer. And what she does, she will work with your prayer requests. She'll pray with you, she'll keep praying for you, like daily. She'll keep praying for you pretty continuously until your issue is satisfactorily resolved. So she stays in touch with you until you have results. And she does get results. She's part of how we really want you to feel like you're seeing results. So, for any of you who aren't enrolled in the course, you're just sitting in for this class, you can still register for the fall quarter, and we do waive the late fee for anyone who registered for tonight. Just let me know soon. We absolutely close registration next Tuesday, because by then it just gets too hard for you to catch up. And we prefer not to have a last-minute dash of many people coming in late, because it does make it difficult for the staff. It makes it harder for us to serve you by getting you all the information you need to get started. The fee for the quarter is $425. We do have payment plan, monthly plans available. And if you enroll with a friend, you each get $100 off your tuition. And as I mentioned, we're experimenting with something new this quarter. We'll keep doing this as long as we have room to do this. So, whatever groups get started now will grandfather in. We might have to discontinue it at some point. But we're offering a discount to any group of 3 or more who are in the same area, or, friends who want to do this work together, who want to be each other's support group, because I think there's a lot of value in that, building of community around this spiritual work. We're offering a significant discount on the tuition for that. It will only be $300 per quarter per student, so long as you maintain 3 or more in your group. And for any of you who are in the northern suburbs of St. Paul who are listening in, who might want to join an existing group, there is one group now, our first group. That's roughly the area where they're meeting. And they're open to taking in new members. So if you're in that area and interested in doing this work with a support group and with a discount, just let me know right away. Really right away. Email me right after this webinar. So, Bill, what I'd like you to do is, I guess it's probably too noisy to unmute everyone, but I would like to take some questions. In particular, does anybody want any help understanding what your symptoms are telling you? Or do you have any other kind of question related to the content tonight? Now, a lot of our work will include some kind of spiritual exercise. This one is kind of content heavy. So we're going to get more deeply into the we're doing healing work stuff next week. And Bill, I can't see the questions on my screen. Yeah, who's that?
This is Kathy.
Kathy.
I've just recently been diagnosed with breast cancer that is metastasized to my liver and my bone.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just wondering what the metaphor might be.
Well, as I was saying, for anything related to women and their breasts, often there's a life pattern of being there for other people. Can you relate to that yet?
Oh, most definitely.
Yes. So, the out of the comfort zone place for you would be looking at ways you can not just receive help from your medical community, but how can you really reach out to your personal community and ask for help? In fact, here's a little exercise I would offer to you. Look around at the people in your life who love you, who might really want to be there for you, and reach out to them and see if they would be willing to be part of your healing committee. And for all the people who say sure, and you could describe it as these are just people who are willing to love me and support me in whatever way you feel comfortable in my healing process. You get all those people, make a big list, and then you find 1 or 2 of those people who really know you well and who you trust to get together with you to compile a list of a gazillion different ways that people could give to you, very specific ways. And that could include spiritual things like spiritual healing, prayer session, praying for you, just sending you love, maybe gathering for circle of hands. And I think are you part of Kay's group?
No.
No, okay. Well, you might want to check in with Gentra Green Gardener. Send me an email. I will give you her website. She's a healer who teaches how to organize your friends into a healing circle for you, where they, just meet and lay hands on you like, every day for so many weeks. That might be one level, but many levels of how people could give to you. It might be making you food. It might be helping with house cleaning. It might be just calling you up to say hi. It might be going along with you on doctor's appointments. Every single thing you can possibly imagine people being there to do for you that you would like to receive, make a big list of this, and then give copies of your list to all of the people on your healing committee and invite them to just give to you whatever they want whenever they want.
All right. A number of people have stepped forward and want to help. So
Yeah. And
I will do this.
yeah, and the stretch for you is to let them and really get specific, because when we say, oh, thank you for your support, and that's the last you hear from people, nobody is really benefiting from that. There are people who will really benefit from being allowed to heal, to help and heal you.
Yeah.
And that's why I'd love for you to check in with, actually for all of you out there, a great site, healinghandsnetwork.org, I believe it is. It's an organization started by Gentra Green Gardener, wonderful healer in the St. Paul area. And she actually helps people organize their friends. So if you're not in a local area, she'll help you put together a healing circle just with people who love you. And it is a very effective way to heal anything. Anything can heal.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for speaking up. Another question about anything.
Lynn?
Yes.
Hi, how about, here's one, hypersomnia, need for excessive sleep.
Now, just start free associating and share any, metaphors that come to mind about, like, what does sleep do for you? Like, what does it do?
Turns you off.
Turns you off? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What else?
Shuts you down.
Shuts you down.
Takes you away.
Takes you away. Okay, so what I'm hearing from you are a lot of metaphors like this is just about shutting down, taking you away, stopping. So I would look at what's going on in your life that you're needing to disconnect from in that way. Because I wasn't hearing anything from you of rejuvenating and, like replenishing. I was getting the shut down, turn off. So I would look around in your life and see what's going on that you need to shut down before it shuts you down. Does that make any sense?
It does. I guess as far as what's going on in my life, I mean, this is something that's been decades in, it's not just an immediate, it's a decades-long thing. So, yeah.
So because it's decades old, what that's saying is that this was part of your very, very early on conditioning. This is how you learned how to be, from early childhood on. So it means looking at behaviors that you feel like you don't have any choice around, and this is where it can be helpful to even do some work with a therapist, because this is going into really deep territory of doing things that feel outside of your conditioning. It might be, and I don't know you well enough to know precisely what that is, but for example, sometimes we just learn that we're never allowed to say no. We're never allowed to be angry. We're never allowed to, we have to be nice or keep a lot inside of ourselves. So anytime a feeling like that would come up, well, boom, we shut that down. So some of the learning how to shut things down before they shut you down might be learning how to be with your emotions differently, or express yourself to people in your life differently in ways that you are trained, you must never do this. And I can't get real specific about you because I don't have enough details, but that's just an example of what I mean,
Right.
that you might need to look at.
Well, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we'll take time. I know this is deep stuff, so we'll take time for one more, because I have a feeling any of these questions are speaking to more than one person.
Lynn?
Yes.
Hey, this is Jacqueline.
Hey, Jacqueline. What you got?
Something that I've really come at peace with, like you said, your friend that was in a wheelchair, of injury from a car accident many years ago, that I've healed, so significantly over the last 20 years. Except I cannot look down and read still to this day, and I couldn't hold a regular job till we got computers. And lately, when we did the list tonight, I know it's with the fifth chakra because it's the occipital area of the neck, and I have a lot of problems with allergies this summer. So I know it's something with expression, which sounds weird for the neck and the back, but it's pure expression on those. So, and I know what caused the allergies. I know this summer, I know what that was about, yelling and screaming, being yelled and screamed at all the time. But if you have any clues.
Yeah, I just was getting, and some of this was intuition, and I think some of what you just shared, being yelled and screamed at a lot, I think that there's something in that throat area that is about speaking out, taking a stand, speaking out even when it's not popular. Heard about the kitty cat on there. Okay, mute yourself, folks. But I think there is something about expression. And I would look at some of your early conditioning, what you were trained not to say, and how not to express yourself. And this is all about coming more into yourself. If you're thinking of continuing on into this next quarter, I would take that into your work with Rev Deb, and I would just really do a lot of, stay in touch with me. I can help you with it as well. But I think there's some big areas of looking at, when you were a kid, what were you taught not to say, do, be, because you'd get yelled at. And there's going to be a fine line, because you don't want to become your yelling parents. And so it's about learning something that you were never taught, how to express yourself powerfully without being on either of those polarities of suppressing your truth or overkill so that you don't get heard. Like, how can you be heard? And we actually will do some, you might want to go back to some of the winter sessions that are about more effective communication and relating, because I think you were in that season, so you would still have access to those. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Good question.
Thank you. It's like, was it till tonight that I had been kind of coming to that conclusion with all these allergies this summer, because I was yelled and screamed at a lot this summer.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was kind of like, well, maybe it's connected to the neck too, when we did the session tonight. So thank you that we got to revisit those questions again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the person that has Kathy, if she needs another support person, I keep crying because I'm feeling healing love for her.
Aw.
That I'm another person that is having problems allowing support, and you know that. If she needs another person, I am a healing touch and a Reiki person. So I would love to be able to give that support that I've gotten through the group, even if I don't physically see you. If she needs another support person or she wants to refer on healing work over the phone, I'd be glad to.
Yeah. Now, do you two know each other already?
No.
No. Well, Kathy and Jacqueline, both, if you would like to do this, send me an email and I will connect you both. So Kathy, if you want to do that, just send me an email. I will connect you with Jacqueline.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Thank.
don't get to do that
Yeah.
anymore, so it's a big gift to me also.
Yeah. Well, thank you, sweetheart. That's really kind of you.
I'm just feeling some relief tonight.
Yeah. Let it go. Tears are very healing. Just let it go. Keep letting it flow. Really. Yeah. Yeah. Let it go. Good for you. Good for you. Well, you know, this has been a little bit of a long session. Usually we run until maybe 8:15. But I really appreciate you all for staying on. I think we'll call it a wrap for tonight. I hope some of you will keep coming back and let me know tonight if you haven't already registered, because tomorrow we just dive in even deeper, and love to do that. You know, this has been such a powerful community for healing and transformation and manifesting, and it's been such a blessing to work with all of you tonight and those of you who've been part of this group and will continue. So let me know tonight, the next day or so, if you want to keep going, if you want to register. If you haven't, let me know if you're in the North St. Paul area and you want to join a group. I'll hook you up with Kay and her group. And until we meet again, I love you all, and namaste. Good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Namaste.
Namaste. Good night, Lynn.
Good night.
Marlene, thanks so much.
Thank you, Lynn. Good night.
Good night.